Greetings. This discussion is entitled Who Can Hold the Air? And it's part two. Part one and part three will be discussed at a different time. Now, this was a subject of a briefing, a tutorial presentation at the Military Operations Research Society, and that was held in June of this year, early part of June of this year. And the president of the Military Operations Research Society is Sarah Stewart. I wanted to give a shout out to her and the great work that she is doing and the great work that the society is doing as well. Okay, the title of this video, this presentation, this briefing is Who Can Hold the Air, Part 2, Great Power Conflict and the Combat Effectiveness Challenge. I'm Captain Kevin Smith, U.S. Navy retired, and I am an author and speaker, as well as having been a Navy fighter pilot and a Sonic Warrior and Top Gun pioneer. It's a portrait of me on the USS Constellation as squadron commander. I was the commanding officer of an embarked squadron deployed in the USS Constellation. This is a picture of the aircraft carrier, CV-64. It's a Kitty Hawk class. It's the first of the supercarrier group or a supercarrier class. And I think there were about 5 carriers in this class. It might have been 6 carriers in this class. This was the second carrier. The first one was the Kitty Hawk. And the classes are all named after the first one. That's how the Navy does it. And I was deployed aboard this carrier operating in the Pacific. So from the perspective of where I'm coming from a carrier-centric perspective. So in terms of combat, this is a carrier-centric combat operation. This is me coming aboard the USS Constellation, and the aircraft that I'm flying is the F-8 Crusader, early supersonic fighter. Eventually, I went on to fly commercially after retiring from the United States Navy and wound up flying the Boeing 777. I was dual qualified in this airplane to fly the Atlantic as well as the Pacific operations. Okay, so this series or this briefing has 3 parts. We are now doing part 2. The first one is an overview, and the third one is a dive into the analytics portion of it. But this one will be the main briefing or the main discussion. Who can hold the air? Now, all of this is centered around the era, which we call the early supersonic era. And the first aircraft that defines this era which I call a first in class, was the F-11 Tiger. I also flew this airplane as well. This is in Blue Angel markings. It was used by the Blue Angels for about 10 years. Also, the first in class for Super Cruise airplane and the aircraft, first aircraft to fly faster than 1,000 miles per hour is the FA Crusader, and I also flew this aircraft as well. So this was first in class for Super Cruise. Now, a little bit of discussion about Super Cruise. Super Cruise is a little strange term, but basically what it means is this. The aircraft is capable of achieving supersonic flight in basic engine, which basically means that without the use of afterburner. And this was the first aircraft capable of flying at supersonic speeds without the use of afterburner. So we have first in class, the F-11 Tiger, and the first in class for Super Cruise, F-11 Tiger for supersonic, and the first in class for Super Cruise was the FA Crusader. Now we're going to go fast forward all the way up to what is currently going on in the Air Force and the Naval Air Force is the sixth generation fighter. The Air Force has just announced their version of the sixth generation fighter, which is the F-47. NGAD stands for Next Generation Air Dominance System. The fifth generation, the one that is just before the sixth generation. The sixth generation fighter is probably still on paper. I'm not sure it's actually flying. It may be actually flying in a secret location. I'm not sure of that. But the fifth generation is in fact the F-22, and here's a picture of the F-22 still flying it with the United States Air Force. And another aircraft that is not yet is not flying but was in a prototype stage was the YF-23. YF-23 is also a fifth generation version of the fighter, as well as Super Cruise capable. So let's dive right in here to discuss who can hold the air. And if we pose that as a question, who can hold the air? The answer, well, let me put it this way. If we pose it as a question with some caveats, who can hold the air when combat occurs at the high end of the conflict spectrum? Who can do that? And my answer is this: those that can outthink and outmaneuver the enemy, those that can execute combat operations at the high end of the conflict spectrum, and execute combat operations at greater velocities than what the enemy can deliver, as well as conserve resources. So we want to be able to execute combat operations in a way that displays high levels of combat effectiveness. What is combat effectiveness? All right, so that's probably the most important point that I'm trying to make here, and probably the most important point in terms of what we're doing currently in the Department of Defense and trying to figure out what are the performance characteristics of the sixth generation fighter series. We want to make sure that it is as effective as it possibly could be in all realms of combat, in all dimensions of performance. And we want to be able to, in fact, it's imperative that whatever we do, it has to be more effective than what the enemy can deliver to the airborne battle space. We have to be uh, more effective in the execution of our combat operations. So here you can see the friendly, which would be us. It has to be well to the right of the enemy on the combat effectiveness spectrum. That happens to be a military imperative. Another way of saying that, of course, is that that is mission critical. Okay, so we have Super Cruise. So we are not going to be effective unless we actually can put an aircraft into the airborne battle space that has Super Cruise capabilities. So we have to be able to do that. All right, so Super Cruise comes first and foremost on our list of things that we must have in order to succeed in battle. The F-8 Crusader was the world's first Super Cruise airplane. The F-22 Raptor, which is currently flying for the Air Force, is in fact Super Cruise capable. The YF-23 Black Widow is in fact a Super Cruise prototype aircraft. And then, of course, the F-47 NGAD, that needs to be Super Cruise as well. Operations research. What is it about operations research that we need to understand? If we need answers, my position is that operations research is the place in which we can at least begin to discover the answers to our burning questions. Now, before we get into the details, let me a little bit of background here would be useful and I think important for all of us. Operations research has a number of promoters and leaders that we probably should be aware of. We probably should give them credit for being leaders in this emerging field. Operations research began as a discipline back during World War II that dealt, among other things, with the world's first airborne radar system, which is a picture here of that system. Um, John Hanley has a book, The U.S. Navy and the National Security Establishment, a critical assessment. This has a lot to do with the field of operations research and its importance in understanding our national defense challenges. Also, operations research was fundamental in the AQP initiative, and that was AQP stands for Advanced Qualification Program that was put together by the Department of Transportation, the Federal Aviation Administration, along with the Air Transport Association, and that dealt with a lot of operations research methodologies that went into designing the next generation airline pilot training program. I was involved in that initiative as well. Also, Colonel John Boyd, United States Air Force, probably one of the top operations researchers that we have ever had in this country. He is, among other things, famous for the um, OODA loop, which stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. Among other things, he was a proponent of the lightweight fighter initiative and a whole bunch of other things. So our hats go off to Colonel John Boyd and his tremendous work and impact on the air combat environment and the air combat system. Another one, not all that well known, but certainly at the top of my list, is Lieutenant Colonel Tommy Hitchcock, World War II champion of the P-51 Mustang. Did a lot of great work to get that aircraft into the operational community and into the World War II battle in Europe. Another one is Jimmy Thatch, a very famous fighter pilot, Navy fighter pilot, World War II Pacific. He also had a great aptitude for looking at things from an operations research perspective. Colonel Brigadier General Robin Olds, another one, a great Air Force fighter pilot, again, had a great, well developed capabilities of understanding things from an operations research perspective. And finally, Captain Frank Ault, the father of Top Gun, he as well was really quite good in his understanding of things from an operations research perspective. Finally, Captain Bill Kuiper, a good friend of mine who was the author of Have Donut, flew the MiG 21, and he also had a great capability of looking at things, understanding things from an operations research perspective. And finally, uh, one of the earlier, probably the earliest one, is Bulky, Oswald Bulky, who was a German aviator in World War One, probably the first one in line of uh, aviation oriented people that could look at things from an operations research perspective. Okay, so let's move along quickly now and let's go through what I call a journey through time. So let's take a quick, very quick journey through time as we begin to understand how we should then consider things from an operations research perspective going forward. So let's go back in time for a moment to see what has been done during that, and not only what has been done, but what can we learn from looking back in time for a moment to see kind of like where we are now. How did we get here to the present before we look forward into the future? So here we go. Journey through time. We'll start off with the F-6F Hellcat, built by Grumman, World War II, famous in the Battle of the Philippine Sea, probably one of the most famous battles in all of combat, and the clear winner of the Battle of the Philippine Sea, World War II Pacific, was in fact the F-6F Hellcat, along with the marvelous pilots who flew such an airplane. And then there's a P-51. P-51 is the won the war single-handedly, won the war in Europe without question. P-51 had a lot of brand new things that were just being developed. The most important one was the wing design. The P-51 was the first aircraft to employ the laminar flow wing design. It enabled the airplane to go 100 knots faster than its closest competitor. In the early jet era, after the P-51, we quickly moved into the jet era. Here you see that there are two versions of the F9F. The one on the left is actually the F9 Panther, which is a straight wing jet. And the aircraft on the right is the F9F Cougar, which is a swept wing version of the Panther. So with a swept wing, the Cougar could actually go 100 knots faster than the Panther, everything else being basically the same. So the swept wing became mission critical going forward. And this proved the value of the swept wing. Back then, there was still a lot of controversy about that. But this proved the value of the swept wing fighter design. Okay, here's a great example of the swept wing. It's the F-86, flown by the U.S. Air Force during the Korean War and after. And here you can see a great example of the laminar flow in a swept wing configuration. And the MiG-15 was the aircraft that we were confronted with during the Korean War, and that was the aircraft to defeat in battle. That was our greatest challenge. We actually did rise to the challenge, and we were able to defeat the MiG-15 in aerial combat. Great credit, particularly to the United States Air Force, for being able to do such a thing. Okay, quickly after the Korean War, the F-11 Tiger entered service. Now, this aircraft, the most amazing thing about this is that how did it come to be? The F-11 Tiger was designed, built, and flown utilizing internal funds and not under government contract. So the company that did this was Grumman Aerospace. Early supersonic airplanes. So let me just very briefly touch upon what the early supersonic airplanes were. The F-4 Phantom II. Here you can see both Air Force and the Navy flew such an airplane. Also, keep in mind that the start of the early supersonic line was the F-11 Tiger. Very important to understand that. Followed closely by the F-A Crusader. This is an aircraft that I flew as well. I flew most of my time is in this particular aircraft, the F-A Crusader. That followed closely behind the F-11 Tiger, and it was seriously supersonic. And also, it was the world's first Super Cruise capable aircraft. Here, the Air Force F-104, seriously supersonic. And we're talking about Mach 2 capable airplane. It may very well have been the first Mach 2 capable airplane, followed quickly by the F-106. The F-106 was a marvelous aircraft, and it lasted a long time in the United States Air Force. And it's one of my favorite airplanes, by the way, and we should still be flying it. I see no reason not to, since it was such a great airplane. Also, one of the highest performing airplanes that we've ever built as a country. Then we have the F-14 and the F-15. The F-15 is the aircraft on the left is still flying with the Air Force. The F-14 has been retired, but these are two Mach 2 plus aircraft. And so we got up to the Mach 2. These are Mach 2 class airplanes. The F-16 and the F-18, these are currently in our inventory right now. The F-16 probably without any external stores is Mach 2. The F-18 is in fact not. It is the highest speed on that aircraft is somewhere in the vicinity of Mach 1.5. So it's quite a bit slower. And it doesn't bring into the airborne battle space the velocities that are needed in order to win. So that's one of the shortcomings that we have got to address ourselves to. The F-22, that is currently flying with the Air Force. It is, in fact, a Mach 2 plus airplane, and it is Super Cruise capable. And I would imagine that this airplane will be around for quite some time. So we have 3 aircraft already that have flown or is flying that are Super Cruise. So we're pretty good in this area. I think probably the American industry is the best in the world in terms of Super Cruise capable aircraft. Now, the big question, who can hold the air during a high-end engagement? And the answer is those that can bring to the airborne battle space superior combat effectiveness. And we're going to be able to do that, not least of which is that we're going to be able to do that with a Super Cruise capable aircraft. All right, to complete our journey through time, a couple of things are important for us to understand from a historical perspective, and that is that the Battle of Midway and the Battle of the Philippine Sea, it's important to understand those battles, and it's important to understand how we were able to be successful in combat during this period of time. In both cases, we were successful in combat, particularly the Battle of the Philippine Sea. And we have to understand that in this battle, the enemy lost about 300 airplanes to our losing 30. So we lost about 30 airplanes. The enemy lost about 300 airplanes in a single battle. So it's important to understand how we were able to do such a thing, such an extraordinary thing. Great power conflict. All right, so let's get it right into this. What is a great power conflict? And within that context, who can hold the air? Great power conflict means that both friendly and enemy forces are more or less evenly matched. If they are evenly matched, then how does one prevail in combat? How does one win? And that is the subject going forward. We have to be able to figure out what are the things that are necessary for us to win in a great power conflict. In other words, who can hold the air in a great power conflict? A couple of axioms that are important for us to understand going forward in a great power conflict. Warfighting occurs at the high end of the conflict spectrum. I mentioned this before. It's very important for us to understand that. Also, in the airborne battle space, combat occurs at the high end of the velocity spectrum as well. And then finally, mastery of high-end tactics is a prerequisite for mission success. You notice that everything is moving to the high end. Everything has moved to the high end. Conflict spectrum, velocity spectrum, high-end tactics, everything is moving to the high end. We have to be able to understand that. And we have to prepare ourselves for that. We have to make sure that we are properly prepared in not only the systems, the combat systems that we're employing, but also in our ability to think and reason. In other words, our mental and intellectual capabilities as well. All right, so who can hold the air? And I came up with this, and I'm going to give credit where credit is due. With a great deal of gratitude, I came up with my title, which was taken from James Hornfisher's book, Who Can Hold the Sea? He is a great naval historian, and his book, highly recommended, by the way. But I got the idea for this initiative after reading James Hornfisher's book on Who Can Hold the Sea. Who can hold the air in a great power conflict, decide whose air combat effectiveness is in fact superior. The first one who can achieve the advantage. Now, this is critical. In the airborne battle space, it is very, very important to understand that you do not enter the airborne battle space willy-nilly. You have to enter it and make sure that once you enter the airborne battle space, you are in an advantageous position. The one who can achieve the advantage and effectively solve the battle problem and dominate the air will be able to dominate the airborne battle space. The one that can enter the airborne battle space with a positive delta Mach. What does that mean? That basically means that the velocity that you are entering the airborne battle space is superior to the velocity that the enemy can generate so as to enter the airborne battle space at its highest velocity. So our velocity has to be higher than what the enemy can deliver. Okay, and that gets us to the entry protocol. The entry protocol is such that we have to be able to achieve and maintain the advantage. And so we do not go into the airborne battle space without pre-thought, without setting ourselves up for success. We have to be able to set ourselves up for success because failure is simply unacceptable in this case. Okay, now we're going to make sure that we are thinking clearly and our thinking capabilities are optimized for this problem that we are facing. So, in order to optimize our cognitive abilities, we are going to consider things in terms of spaces and spectrums, not discrete data points. It's very, very important to realize that we have to be able to think and operate within the context of spaces and spectrums and not think in terms of discrete data points. Very, very important. Along with that, we have to be able to think critically. Critical Thinking Essentials Quick Reference Handbook is a book that I have written, and I highly recommend that because critical thinking is, in fact, the starting point in order for us to effectively deal with spaces and spectrums. We have to be able to first and foremost think critically. Spaces and spectrums. We are dealing with an arena that contains such a reality. Battle space, problem space, maneuver space, volume of interest, weapons envelope, you name it. Everything is spaces and spectrums, conflict spectrum, velocity spectrum, energy spectrum, tactic spectrum. Remember, we talked about the high-end tactics. Well, that's on the tactic spectrum. Complexity spectrum, effectiveness spectrum. Everything deals with spaces and spectrums, and that's how we are going to be able to deal with this new reality, is to think in terms of spaces and spectrums. The spectrum reference point, I'm going to suggest here, strongly suggest, excuse me, that we have knowledge of the spectrum reference point, which is what? What enables us to achieve supersonic flight in an optimum way, in the most optimum way to achieve supersonic capabilities. We have to have a drag coefficient around 0.0133. This is an actual drag coefficient of a supercruise airplane. The acceleration rate of such an aircraft is 50 knots per second. We have to be able to have at least that 50 knots a second acceleration rate, which is, of course, agility. And we have to have very low coefficient of drag in order for us to succeed in battle. That gives us the Vmax. The Vmax is what is the highest speed that you can attain. Now, keep in mind that we're not talking about the high end speed. We're talking about the highest tactically relevant speed, not the ultimate speed of the airplane, but what is the tactically relevant speed at the high end of the velocity spectrum. Velocity spectrum is a very complex space or spectrum. It's a very complex, has a lot of things associated with it. There is, of course, the point in which supersonic flight occurs. This is where the compressibility of air occurs as well. So the point in which you go supersonic is also the point in which the air compresses. We also have the point at which supercruise. At what point can you above supersonic flight can you achieve supercruise? How fast can you go in basic engine? How can you achieve positive delta Mach when you enter the airborne battle space? In other words, part of the entry protocol is to enter the airborne battle space with a positive delta Mach with respect to the enemy. And then, of course, what is your drag energy conversion number, and so forth and so on. You notice here that I have also included time compression. So at some point in the velocity spectrum, time compression becomes a factor as well. And we will talk about that in shortly. Uh, in just a few more minutes, we will talk about time compression. Okay, kinematics. We talked a little bit about kinematics. I want to stress the fact that the acceleration rate is as important as well. Max velocity, of course, but the time it takes to get there is an important aspect of kinematics as well. And of course, sustained G's, that's also part of kinematics. And we have to have a complete package of capabilities with respect to kinematics if we are going to succeed in battle. The combat effectiveness spectrum. Here I have listed the FA-18 Super Hornet for maneuvering and non-maneuvering targets. The combat effectiveness spectrum. Now I'm covering up the very end point. So let me explain the very high end of the combat effectiveness spectrum is called insurmountable best in class. Now my picture is covering that up, but just keep that in mind. Insurmountable best in class is at the very high end of the combat effectiveness spectrum. And then a little bit less than that is highly effective, and then moderately effective, and all the way at the low end is ineffective. The FA-18 Super Hornet for non-maneuvering targets is highly effective. However, the FA-18 Super Hornet for maneuvering targets is not highly effective. It's not even effective. It is moderately effective because it cannot achieve velocities that are necessary to succeed in combat in the current or expected airborne battle space. Okay, spaces. So we'll be talking about spaces now. The first is our mind space, or the mind space, which is the intellectual capabilities and capacities of the warrior. So what is it about the warrior that we have to understand? And I talk about it in terms of the curated mind space for the air combat warrior. What is it that we must have within that mind space in order to optimize our performance in the airborne battle space? Okay, so let's keep that in mind. The first order of business here is the human, as Colonel John Boyd said. What's important is ideas, people, and technology in that order. So ideas, the ability to solve a complex battle problem, is in fact the first order of business. Can we do that? Can we bring that problem-solving capabilities into the airborne battle space? Can we do that? And I don't see anybody talking about that. I see people talking about, most of the time, people talk about the hardware, the technology, whatever, but they don't talk about problem-solving skills. They don't talk about that. They just assume that's going to happen. I think that is a dangerous assumption that that we don't take that into account. We just kind of like gloss that over in terms of its importance. And we just sort of like assume it's going to happen. We don't want to spend a lot of time on it, maybe because we don't know how to speak about it intelligently. That's possible. Maybe we don't. Maybe we should learn how to speak about complex problem solving in the airborne battle space. Maybe we should learn how to speak about that and deal with that effectively. The other thing here is the OODA loop brought, given to us by the amazing Colonel John Boyd, and observe, orient, decide, act. Can we do that well within the context of an ever-changing world? Okay, the airborne battle space is not static, it's dynamic, it's ever-changing. And can we discipline ourselves to deal with that, not in a scatterbrained way, but in a disciplined way? Can we address ourselves to the airborne battle problem in a very organized and disciplined way? This is one way to do it, probably the best way. Okay, so we have spaces. We have the maneuver space, the battle space, the problem space, the solution space. We have those spaces, and we have to be able to go into those arenas and have that what it takes in order for us to be successful in each one of these spaces, each one of these arenas. One way to do that is to understand what it takes to make decisions in a complex environment. I have a paper, peer-reviewed paper, that has been published by IGI Global that deals with this in a very analytical way. I highly recommend this paper. The decision making in complex environments, just go to the IGI Global website and you can find it and you can download it and read it. I would highly recommend that going forward. The effectiveness envelope contains, among other things, but it certainly contains 4 key things. Their velocity, energy, agility, and lethality. We want our abilities to operate at the very upper high end. We have to develop those capabilities and abilities, and we have to be effective in the combat arena, more effective than our enemy. Okay, we have to be able to gain the advantage when we go into the airborne battle space. In order for us to be effective, we have to be on the offensive. Okay, we are not going to be effective if we're on the defensive. If we are in a disadvantaged position, we cannot be as effective as our enemy. And so we are probably not going to prevail in this conflict. And most likely the best order of things would be to exit the airborne battle space and come back when we're ready to engage the enemy and win. We have to be on the advantage. We have to have the offensive positioning in order for us to succeed. Within the airborne battle space, we have the maneuver space. We have the place in which maneuvers can, should, and will be conducted. So understanding the maneuver space is important as well. The maneuver space contains certain things. just to keep in mind, TGA means tactical geometry advantage. The maneuver space contains the geometrical arrangement of friendly and enemy forces. Okay. TGA means tactical geometry advantage. We want to be able to have the advantage tactically. Our geometrical arrangement should be advantageous with respect to the enemy forces. So, understanding in maneuver space. This gets a little bit complicated here, but it's important for us to understand that this is one of the things that go into solving the battle problem is the maneuver space in our tactical positioning within the maneuver space. Here we can see that we have the TAA, which is the target aspect angle, and we have also the ATA, which is the antenna train angle. They come together. They're additive, and we can create this algorithm, which is also an equation, by the way, the theorem. So the tactical geometry advantage is 180 minus the antenna train angle plus the target aspect angle divided by 180. Okay. That will give us the tactical geometry advantage. And if we are in an advantageous position, we should pursue the attack. If we are not, then we have to reposition ourselves before we pursue the attack. Okay, again, we should do this calculation. Hopefully we have systems on board that can help us do this quick calculation in a dynamic environment. But we have to be able to do this calculation in our heads if we don't have any other way to do it to give us the number. What is the number that we're looking at? Well, we have two cases here, case number 5 and case number 6. We have two cases. And let's take a look at them from a tactical geometry advantage standpoint. Here we have case number 6 is the most advantageous position that we could achieve. And that has a tactical geometry advantage of 0.75. And that means that we are, in fact, in an advantageous position. Case number 5, you notice that we are not in an advantageous position. We're in a neutral position with respect to the enemy. So case number 6 is, in fact, the place where we should be if we're not already there. This is all explained in my book, Mission Adaptive Display Technologies and Operational Decision Making in Aviation, published by IGI Global. You can find this book anywhere. It's available through the publisher. It's available on Amazon. Highly recommend it going forward. It's a good book for the operations research community to have at their disposal, particularly if you're dealing with aerial combat. Okay, we talked about time compression. I mentioned earlier we're going to be discussing time compression. Time compression occurs on the velocity spectrum at a certain point. What is that point? That point experimentally has been determined to be somewhere in the vicinity of 450 knots, but it's roughly at that point. And what does that mean? What does time compression mean? Time compression means that the time available to do something is less than the time required to execute an activity. Okay, so again, with respect to executing a particular set of tasks or performing a certain kind of activity, it could be a mental activity as well as a psychomotor activity, the time available to do it is less than the time required. Therefore, certain adjustments have to be made or the mission will not be successful. Those adjustments require us to do a lot of intuitive conceptualization. We have to be finely tuned in the intuitive domain to intuit the best way to do something, given that we don't have a lot of time to do it. Now, the technical term that we use in this regard is called workload management. We have to manage our workload consistent with the time available to perform these activities. It's called workload management. Pretty critical. Workload management, by the way, at the high end of the time continuum is mission critical. The high end of velocity continuum is mission critical. That's what I meant to say. Workload management, activity, time compression, workload management, all those things come together. We have to be proficient workload managers. We have to be highly proficient and we have to be highly effective in this challenge. Our ability to manage workload is, in fact, mission critical. Okay, so we have range, we have velocity squared, we have kinetic energy. I'm just going to throw these things out and just point out that okay, this is a very important and yet it is poorly understood area of inquiry. It is very poorly understood. We talk about range as a standalone entity, and it is not. Range is not standalone. Range has a lot to do with velocity. Range has a lot to do with chemical energy. Range has a lot to do with kinetic energy. I will also add entropy in there. So if range becomes, if we want to extend the combat range of these 6th generation fighters out to 1,000 miles from 500, that involves considerations of a whole bunch of things. I've listed only some of them here. And this gets into high level of analytics in order for us to deal with this effectively. Okay, everything is moved to the high end. I want to make this, I said this before, I want to say it again, I want to stress this continuously, which is everything has moved to the high end. It's a high-end conflict, high-end velocity spectrum, high-end tactics, high-end energy spectrum, and high-end reasoning and problem-solving spectrum as well. Okay, here you see that at the high end of the performance spectrum, we want to be able to solve a complex battle problem under increased time compression. That's particularly important. Our entry protocol, we have to know what that is, and we have to enter the airborne battle space with a position and kinematic advantage such that we can execute offensive maneuver, an offensive maneuver, or execute offensive maneuvering. And there's a couple of ways to say that. So, do we have a tactical advantage? If the answer is yes, then we can execute an offensive maneuver. If the answer is no, then we have to be prepared to execute a defensive maneuver and conserve resources and not get shot down. What is mission critical? We have to be able to understand mission critical things. And just to quickly point out that determining the battle plan, once you enter the airborne battle space, you finalize your attack plan, or you finalize the battle plan. Once you do that, that is the most mission critical thing that exists in all of the activities that you could be dealing with in air combat. Just wanted to point that out. Combat effectiveness parameters includes a number of things, but the most important thing for aerial combat is velocity. There is no substitute for velocity. I know some would like to argue this point, but I'm sorry. That is my position, my firm position. There is no substitute for velocity. Now keep this in mind. It's velocity that keeps us airborne. Okay, just remember, velocity keeps us airborne. It doesn't matter how many terabytes of processing we have, what is the range of our radars, what is the electronic warfare suite, whatever is going on. Keep in mind that none of this matters if we cannot achieve velocity. Okay, the combat vehicle is constantly moving through time and space. Velocity is the thing that keeps us airborne. Without velocity, we cannot maintain flight. It's impossible. There's other things as well, but velocity is the key to one of the keys to mission success. Combat effectiveness of a forward deployed combat unit considers the skillful execution of the battle plan when enemy engagement occurs at the high end of the conflict spectrum. Considerations of combat effectiveness become mission critical at a location in which engagement with the enemy occurs. The location is the entry point into the airborne battle space, and related activities within the space are contained within the entry protocol. The entry protocol considers a number of effectiveness parameters in which mission success resides. Okay, that completes this video, this tutorial, and part 3 will include this. This is part 2, by the way, and then part 3, which will be the subject of another video, contains the analytics portion of the combat effectiveness challenge. Thank you for watching, and we will see you all at another video time shortly.